Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Thrive After Sports podcast. If you are tuning in with us on The Power of Story, we appreciate you being there with us as well. I'm here with a very special guest, a woman who has become a very good friend of mine since we connected. I guess it's been, about 8 months, probably like 6-7 months now. Erica, does that sound about right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm here with Erica Singleton, the Director of Communications for Professionals Beyond the Game. I'm sure we will take a deep dive into what that is, but I'm going to get out the way for a second because this woman has an amazing story. And I know all the listeners, whether you're a current athlete, a former athlete, the parent of an athlete, if you're a coach, no matter where you are in the world of athletics, you're going to get a ton out of hearing this woman's story. So let's get right into it. Where does the journey of Erica Singleton begin? Let's talk about it.
Well, it's really funny. I was doing an interview the other day and the person on it said that I started flexing, and I don't feel that way, but he was right.
Go ahead and flex, Erica. Flex on it.
In general, my experiences have been good, and there are times that I really think it's pretty unreal because there was a point in my life where everything I wanted to do came to pass. So where I'm at right now is realizing that maybe my dreams weren't big enough, but I'll go back to where we started. I had a Barbie news station. It was one of my most prized possessions as a youth. And it was one of those things. Barbie had a news desk, a pink news desk. She had a news chair. She had a camera, a light. She had a flip card, kind of weather screen behind her. And so in that, I saw what I thought I wanted to do. I wanted to own my own news station. And as I started to go through school, nobody really gives you a plan for owning your own news station. And so that started to feel a little bit out of reach. But what didn't feel out of reach was being on the news. And so that's where I started. My family have been sports fans, like rabid at times sports fans, and my sister went to school for mass communication, so then I really had an understanding of like what you study for that as well, and I started to want to go into sports broadcasting specifically, and as a fan of sports, it really felt like a good fit. So I ended up starting doing the morning announcements in high school. I did them over the intercom at first, and then I also did televised morning announcements because I am grateful to say that my high school in Germantown, Maryland, Seneca Valley High School, actually had a recording studio for the show It's Academic. And so Quizmaster Challenge actually is the one that was done out of Seneca Valley. It's Academic was the larger show in the DC metropolitan area, but the smaller version of it was Quizmaster Challenge. That was actually recorded in my high school. And so I was able to do televised morning announcements from there as well. If it's there, you should take advantage of it. And I can't say that enough because there's so many opportunities that came to me just because I did at the time that it was there. And like I said, it's been unreal. So from there, I was able to go to Winthrop University. At Winthrop, I worked in the mass communications department. So I did the televised news magazine at Winthrop as well. I learned how to shoot, edit, and do on camera on my own for everything there. A good portion of what I was being taught was to work on camera. But I had a number of different professors who told me to know how to shoot for myself because they were like, a lot of places hire you as a one-man band, so you need to know how to do everything. And so I learned how to do everything. And then I had another professor who told me if you can write, you can do anything. So he told me to really focus on my writing, and I did. And that has been absolutely true because when there weren't jobs in television or radio, then I also worked in newspaper and magazine. And so before I left Winthrop, I spent my last semester as the sports editor of the Johnsonian, which was the newspaper there. And I was the programming assistant for the radio station, which I ended up getting that job because I came home during the summer and my sister heard that one of the local radio stations in DC was looking for interns. I got out of my bed and I faxed a resume that I had ready. I was the first person to fax it over and I got the job. So I worked for a nationally syndicated show.
Let's go.
Senior year in college, yeah, and it was amazing. Russ Parr and Olivia Fox at the time were the hosts, and it was such a great opportunity. So that is where my origin story begins. When I left Winthrop, I studied in mass communications with a specialization in sports broadcast, and my minor was Spanish. During my time there, I trained to become a certified lifeguard and a water safety instructor. And so before I got jobs in my field, that is what I did. I worked at a pool in a predominantly Black and Hispanic community. So I used my Spanish the first year out of school on a regular basis. And it was exciting. It was actually a hard decision for me to leave aquatics. I really did enjoy it. But I wanted to go into the field that I actually paid. My parents paid for the education for. So I worked at WJFK, a CBS radio station outside of DC in Fairfax, Virginia. And so that's where my journey began. And even in that, it was just an amazing experience. I applied to be a weekend board operator, which means you basically come in and you work everything when none of the personalities are in. They brought me in for a specific show. I worked for the G. Gordon Liddy show. I became a book reviewer for G. Gordon Liddy as well. And then from weekend board operator, book reviewer, and then I worked on the Redskins radio programs for the live broadcasts of Redskins games. At the time, it was Redskins. It is now the Washington football team. But at the time, it was the Redskins radio network, and it was all across the East Coast. I was hired as the programming assistant after about 4 months in those positions. So that was my first major job out of college.
You know what, Erica, I'm just waiting to hear, what haven't you done at this point? You know what I mean? I was waiting for you to go into, and then I learned how to pilot an aircraft. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, why?
Say you've done. I mean, I will say at 21 and 22, I really couldn't have imagined that I could be able to say all of these things that I wanted to do. You know, on my wish list of career wants, I wanted to cover an all-star weekend. I got that in my first 8 months out of school. First 8 months, I covered the All-Star Weekend in DC. I covered it for WJFK. It was the craziest experience. And again, just being there and speaking up. There was a sports show. The hosts were a little bit burned out. They didn't want to go. They didn't want to do it live. They wanted to send somebody in their place to do the All-Star Weekend. And so they were just going to send an intern as the programming assistant. I was like, oh, no. I'm going to take somebody's pass. You guys just tell me what it is that you need. And it was just an amazing experience. But that was the first of my wish list. And at that point, I don't think I was always confident enough to think, if you want to do it, you can. But at the beginning of my career, as things started to come with the work that I was doing and my work ethic, I really started to believe, like, if you want it, just ask. Get the no, but don't decide beforehand that it couldn't possibly get it. You know, at that point, I did not think I would meet this wish list of athletes that I wanted to meet as a fan in a professional sense, and I did. Like, you name it. The year that I covered the All-Star Weekend, my first year, was the anniversary. So they brought back Dr. J. They brought back Larry Bird. They brought back Bill Russell. And it was Shaq was still playing, and Kobe was playing, and Kevin Garnett was playing. It was Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson's freshman year, rookie year. So they were in the rookie game. Like, it was a who's who in basketball. And as a huge basketball fan, like, I couldn't have dreamed it better. And there I was.
Wow. It seems like, and you touched on this a second ago, where you were saying that as you continue to have wins, as you continue to just ask, your confidence started to build because you were putting yourself in position. And really, everything you just laid out is a journey of when opportunity meets preparation. You know, when you
Absolutely.
talked about how you sent that fax over, you had the resume ready to go.
Yep.
I think that's awesome. Now, I want to take it back for a second too, while you were in college, because I know you were a thrower. You did shot put, discus, javelin, and hammer.
Yep.
So what is it like? Because you already knew what you wanted to do going into college. Like you said, you know, you knew from a little girl that you wanted to be broadcasting, you know, and I think that it's interesting because we never had anyone on the show who was a college athlete, but also was learning how to shoot and edit and do all these different things that you were doing. What was that experience like? Was it like it almost seems like you get the best of both worlds. Like, it's not like you're taking a break. Can you just detail your college experience a little bit more? I think that's interesting.
You do, you honestly do. And what's really funny is I want to start out with, I started throwing in middle school as a conditioning sport outside of basketball. Basketball was life for me. I played it year round starting when I was 9 years old, but I got recruited by a private school. I did not go to that private school. I felt like my senior year for my high school, I was punished by my coach for being recruited. So my position changed after almost 6 years of playing the same position. I was put, instead of a starter, I was put as a backup behind a 6'1" center who was outstanding in her position. We had played as teammates for years. I'm 5'11", just missed 6 foot. I just missed. But so I was a little bit disillusioned with basketball. And so I had been recruited by some schools, smaller schools, for basketball. But I got into school on my academics. I walked on at Winthrop. And I had enough of a portfolio as a thrower that it was something that they were interested in, because I would bring them points. And then I did actually get some money with that as well. But I'm grateful for being a college athlete, because there was some extra structure created in my life. I knew if I went wild in the fall, I'd have to pull my life together in the spring. But there were also a lot of realities, you know, throwers in general, you have a lot of, random drug testing. And it was never random for throwers. There was always going to be one of us included. And so the realities of what was happening with people competing became real very fast as a Division I thrower. But also as a fan, I was able to go out and enjoy my love of sports and really kind of push the boundaries of being, having love for my school. I traveled with the men's basketball team 2 different times to the state that I was living in, that I was from. So Winthrop's in South Carolina. I'd gone to high school in Maryland. Our team went up to Maryland, and I traveled up and went home to be able to do a road trip story with them. So to be on the road with the team when they played at UMBC, that was a special piece that very few people were able to do road trip stories like that with the team just on a regular season. Sometimes they would do it when they would make it to a tournament or when they were in conference, but just as a regular season. And it created a relationship between me and those players as well. Like, they saw me at the beginning of the season covering them on television. And then when I became the sports editor and I was doing all of the newspaper, I had a relationship with the sports information department already, starting to understand what it would be like as a writer outside of college. Being a college student, you are afforded different liberties, I'll say. They're a lot nicer to you than they are in the real world. But I was able to kind of get a feel for both, because at the same time, I was the only Black woman in the room all the time at a small Southern school. The only woman usually in our sports in the post-game conference was usually either a coach's wife, a coach's daughter, or myself. And so I also was able to start building not just my confidence, but my belief that I belonged there for reasons other than to bring somebody coffee. Because I was asked more than once to bring some of those sports. Oh, could you get me something to drink? Like, I mean, if you find where the coffee is, I'd love to know, but I'm here as a writer as well. So it was actually probably the best experience I ever could have gotten, because when I started to go into bigger events, I was already very well versed in how to handle myself in a post-game situation. They didn't allow locker room, of course, for a college student going into a college locker room. I did not do that on campus. So that was a new experience for me when I went out and actually started covering sports outside of college. But everything else, knowing that this is the team that I'm representing and that I'm going to have to be in classes with some of these people in what I'm writing as well. So understanding how to be objective, but also not be rude, not be mean, you get to a point in life as a sports fan, a lot of people, will talk about how teams suck and, oh, they're not giving it their all and everything. And it's very different when you know the people personally. But it is also very different when you live with these people. They live in the same place that you live. They eat in the same place you eat every day. They might be your partner in a group. Like, you don't know if you're going to be in classes with these people or not. So it really helped me have a different type of humanity in covering sports. And I went beyond post game. National organizations and regional organizations are going to do post game immediately. For the campus station, we weren't doing post games. So I had to find ways to do stories that were compelling, that people would want to watch and want to read, that could keep for a couple of days, but also gave me an edge over someone else. So I got to know the people, and I took that into my career as well, highlighting parts of their lives that weren't always highlighted as part of sports. Being able to stand in the locker room with Jonathan Ogden when he was with the Baltimore Ravens and talk to him about the Laurel K. Hamilton books in his locker, and then find out his background and what he loved to read, and being involved in book clubs and getting his teammates involved in book clubs and stuff like that, really was the type of thing that I was more comfortable having conversations about, because I had already treated my classmates as people and not just athletes. And so being an athlete and being a journalist, or starting out as a journalist in college, that was what doing that really, really helped me a lot with.
Yeah. Do you think that having those, like you said, those personal relationships with the players, being in the same area, growing up in the same types of neighborhoods, and also, being an athlete yourself, do you think that being able to kind of give a behind the scenes and ask some of those deeper questions instead of the typical, why do you think, how'd the team do tonight? And you being able to like go into their personal lives and have real conversations. Do you think that was the catalyst for your career to kind of take? Because I know I said I wasn't going to read the bio. I might have to read it in a second. But do you think that was the reason why your career started to take off and you were able to really continue to put yourself in such great positions?
I will say maybe. I mean, really understanding that an interview is a conversation, really getting to a point where I understood that it's a conversation. It's not just me throwing questions at you for you to give me an answer that I can drop into a story I've written already. It is a conversation, and being prepared to use the gems that you give me in that conversation. I think that's one of the first parts. And then also to look at the athletes as people and not just commodities and workhorses is one of the other things. I think that experience, and also being an athlete, I would think about the fact that 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be trying to talk to these people on one of the worst days of their life, of one of their worst work days, because somebody is always the loser. And the plan that they had for themselves and what they wanted to happen is not going to turn out the way that they want. And at the end of that, I'm trying to get them to provide the information for my work. So they're unhappy with theirs, and I want them to become mine. So really understanding when I'm having these conversations that sometimes there is a diplomatic way to ask a question that's going to be uncomfortable. There is a time and a place for every question. And sometimes, even though you want to ask it, it's not the time. And then also really, really accepting and being open to the fact that they're people. They are always people and human. And I do think that this helped me a lot throughout my career to accept that people have bad days. I didn't hold it against anybody. And that for all people, there has to be a measure of trust. And those commonalities that we have open the doorway to create trust. When I walk into an interview with a Black man to begin with, we have something in common that the interviewer who's a white man doesn't have with him. However, they're both men. So they have that, and I have our background. Somehow or another, we know that there's something in our background, there's something in our roots that is common, and that will start us out. That's enough of an opening sometimes. Being a woman and covering women when everybody else is around you is a man also gives you a little bit more commonality. You know, I had a conversation with Tony Kornheiser once about him being a journalist and covering Mary Lou Retton when she was just coming up. And he talks about how in interviews with her, it was so hard to find commonality because she was a child at the time. She was a child star, and he wasn't a gymnast. He hadn't been covering gymnastics for years. So sometimes you go into it, and so you just have to be open to have a conversation and figure out and get to know that person and treat their story with respect. Treat their story with respect at all times. People open up to you a lot more when they really believe in you. Believe that you don't mean to harm them.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you, Erica. This was one of those moments right now where I was sitting back and I forgot I was interviewing you. I'm watching you like, man, this is a good show right now. Erica's going in, like, man. So thank you for sharing all that. I want to take a second because, I mean, like we've heard, you've had an amazing career, and it's not by accident. It's by you putting yourself in position. Some people listening to this, especially former athletes, or, you know, maybe they had their season cut short. They may be thinking that's great that Erica knew that what she wanted to do when she was a kid and she was playing with the, you know, the Barbie news station. But here I am in my early 20s, and I have no idea what I want to do with my life. Can you just, and I know this is an area, this is how you and I first connected on these topics. Can you give some advice to athletes right now, or just people in general, because we know it's not just athletes, who may be struggling to figure out what is my mission in life? What am I supposed to be doing? What do I want to create for myself? Can you give some advice to those people?
Absolutely. I went into my first love, which was communications and covering sports. And my biggest supporter in all of that was my dad. And when my dad passed, I lost the fire for it. It was so hard to get up every day and go cover it because I didn't have that to share with him. And I took a leap on faith and I left Newell. I will back up because that's not where the leap started. I can look back on it and say that I was fortunate because things would have been very different. But when my dad passed, I had just been laid off by a newspaper that was going under. And so where I am now in my career began there because I had to reevaluate if I wanted to stay in communications and journalism specifically, because newspapers were starting to go under. And that was becoming a little bit more obsolete. And I had been out of television and radio for a little while at that point. Did I want to try to go back to that? And so I also covered travel at some point and entertainment. I would end up covering government and education as well. So I had some ideas for some kind of more less newsy shows. And so I decided to take my chance and move to California. And I moved out to California to actually kind of pursue working in production on the entertainment side, so no longer news side. And part of that began because my dad passed and I didn't have a job anymore. And I just didn't have the fire in me to do sports anymore. I still was a sports fan. But sitting through games and stuff, I would think about how excited he would be to watch it. And so I had to learn how to pivot. And I went out to California and I was all excited and I had a job lined up. And you find out pretty quickly if they keep pushing back your original production date, you probably lost your funding. And so I was living in California with no job. And I was overqualified for everything that I applied for. Every grocery store, every restaurant, everything. They would tell me that they looked at my resume and I looked like I was hardworking, but they could tell because of my skill set and everything that I probably wouldn't stay. So it really didn't work. They needed somebody who was going to stay. So it was the first time in my life that I felt like I had completely failed, just failed. And I didn't know what to do next. I knew what I wanted, And I knew I had accomplished so much in my career. It looked great, as we've said. But I almost can look back now. So I was 32 at the time. I can look back now and say, I probably didn't dream big enough, because I reached all of my goals by the time I was 32, in covering just about everything I ever wanted to cover and producing my own original programming. And so what I really had to do, one, is start to believe in myself again, that if I looked at a different path, that I was capable of doing it. And so I ended up back in aquatics. I started out as a swim instructor with a swim school. I fell back on my love for aquatics and also my interest in drowning prevention. Children, I know how to swim. I love to swim. I swim competitively as well. And you look at children as they're growing up, those that don't know how to swim in communities with pools are outcasts. They don't get invited to things. They're not comfortable. They don't get in. People don't want to invite them anymore, or parents are afraid of what might happen with this child who doesn't know how to swim. So the idea that everybody could enjoy it is kind of where I came into it at. But for me, it was threefold. It was the team behind me. My family and my friends have been my biggest supporters the entire time. And when I start to doubt and when I start to talk negative to myself, I have a team of people who support me when things are high and when things have been low. And so if the circle around you doesn't support you and build you up, you might need a new circle. Because that's one of the first things when you find yourself without direction and without vision, is that you have to have somebody around you who believes in whatever it is that you decide. So I had been in communications and doing all of this stuff, and I walked in one day and was like, I'm working in aquatics. And there were a couple of huhs, but never a, what are you doing? Girl, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, you need to go out, and how you gonna do, like, it was all, okay, so what is this? Is this a pit stop? Are you really enjoying it? Like, what is it? And so it was just an open conversation every time. It was never this is stupid, or, this can't pay your bills. Like, have you figured out how to make this work? Okay. All right. Let me know how it goes. So having a team around you that supports you is one of the steps that you absolutely have to have. I journal. I've always liked to journal. I look back at the things that I've written in the past and the goals that I have and the doubts that I wrote about for myself. And so when I get to certain points, I'm able to look at my progress and my process. Sometimes I have to write something out and figure out how it sounds to me before I can say it to someone else. And I take, it can't be said enough. I make use of opportunities. If I meet somebody who says, I'm interested in you, or what you said made sense to me, email me, call me, I've worked on this, or I know this person, I follow up. I make use of that. If somebody formed their mouth into saying something, I take them on their word. If they didn't mean it, I'll figure it out later. But as long as they said it, I'm going to go with it. So like, you'll learn really quick not to say something around me if you don't mean it.
That's right.
Yeah. And last but not least, as I said, I got away from it for a while. I can admit to that. I lost my confidence. I lost some of my belief, and I let fear lead me for a while. But I got back to letting somebody else give me the no. I think that is very important, is that if you want to do something, try to do it. Take that first step. And if you get a no, okay. But don't tell yourself no before you've done it. Those are some of the biggest things for me. I am now in my 40s, and again, come full circle. Like, the circle is round in this world. And good times have led to bad times, have led to good times. December 31st of 2020, I was laid off from another job. I actually left aquatics after 6 years, and actually started kind of in health and safety. I became a compliance officer. And I was working for a radiology practice. I never worked anything in the medical field, but you know, if there's an opportunity and a chance for me to expand my knowledge base, I'll take it. And I made some contacts with different people, and I had, you know, been in touch with some employment agencies when, again, I was without direction. And then I lost that job. And when I lost that job, I had a friend who said, if you can, in any way that you can, take some time for yourself and really figure out what you want to do next. And that was the best advice that I ever had. I realized that I was kind of spiraling into a depression. I hadn't completely dealt with grief over people that we lost in my family and my friend base in 2020. And so taking some time with myself in 2021 was so very important. And at that point, I decided to invest in myself and really start doing things for myself in a way that I never had before. I've always worked for other people, yes, and things that I loved, but I worked for other people. And, you know, you met me with Professionals Beyond the Game. One of my classmates from Winthrop and I decided to work on a nonprofit that really looked at helping athletes prepare for their lives beyond their sport, because both of us thought about how little people put into us for that. I knew what I wanted. I didn't need a whole lot of input from other people. But what I did need, I actually didn't get in a lot of different places. You know, what I taught other and mentored about for people going into the communications field wasn't given to me. And I won't say that it wouldn't have been. I actually graduated early. So that was also part of it. I graduated in 3 years. So I didn't have a tight resume reel. It wasn't very good. I didn't have an audio reel at all for radio. I didn't have any clips put together. I thankfully was able to put some together because I would record my shows and send them to my family because they couldn't hear them. So as I started applying for jobs, I had a very good resume, and I was very good at cover letters. We had practiced that a lot, but that's for general work, like specific to the field. I wasn't prepared. And so there were some things that we both, Jantonio, founder of Professionals Beyond the Game, there were some things that we talked about that we realized after years in the field that were not given to us as college athletes. I think at no fault for everyone involved, but sometimes a fault for specific people involved. The college likes to get the sweat equity out of the athlete, but they don't put anything specific back into some of them. And so I mean, the experience is as good as what's given to you. So if the NCAA has a mental wellness and mental health program that coaching staffs and athletic directors know about, but don't share with the athletes, how good is the program? Mm-hmm. If nobody knows that it exists, what good is it doing anybody? And so that was part of our mission and part of my focus in this new change was to also give back. I did a lot of work for myself that I'm very proud of and very excited about, but not a lot of it did anything for anyone else. As a journalist, I felt really privileged to be able to educate and inform the community. And then as a swim instructor and an aquatics director, working on drowning prevention and safety. But after that, what endures? When I'm not at those places anymore, there are certain families that feel like Miss Erica and Coach Erica did a lot for them, but what endures in my work? And so that was what I sat down and really thought about, what I wanted. And so I think at any age, that's really important, is really figuring out what it is that you want to accomplish. You know, it's not going to be in your 20s that you'll be able to say you did it. But if you are in your 40s and you're looking back, what would you like to be able to say? And then from your 40s to your 60s or 50, like even 10 years, my dad always told me to make a 5-year plan. He was all about it. And there is not a person who has sat down with me for any amount of time that I have not said that to, because it was invaluable. And I didn't understand it in the very beginning, because he would say, make the 5-year plan. Understand that things are going to change and you may have to adjust the plan, but make the plan so that you have something written out or fleshed out to work towards. Some people just do 3 years because 5 years seems daunting. Some people just do 2, but make a plan, have a plan, and have some goals.
You know what, Erica? I'm loving this interview. I'm loving this conversation and all the things you're sharing.
Talking.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Though, that's all we need is just you talking, because every time it's just a bunch of gems poured out. So it's a beautiful thing. And I love what you shared about, there was a time where you were doing so much for yourself, which is nothing wrong with that. You gotta carve out your lane and do what you need to do to get yours. But how you had that shift in mindset about what am I leaving behind and how can I start putting more energy into helping others. And I'm curious to know, I know we mentioned professionals beyond the game. Obviously, that's a major staple and you're heavily involved in that. What is you don't have to give the full details of the 5-year plan, but what's next for Erica Singleton? Like, what's on the horizon? What are you working on? What do you foresee? And how do you, envision the next several years of your life unfolding?
Well, I think I had mentioned to you, I've come full circle. So I was a thrower. I'm now a throwers coach for a high school team. I was a competitive swimmer. I am a middle school swim coach. And I worked in distance education at Winthrop. And as I said, I minored in Spanish. And so now I was a Spanish substitute teacher. So one of the first things I did is I helped out in the schools during the pandemic when they asked for help, as far as like getting substitutes, getting people to come in with teachers that weren't able to return, with people that had problems with schedules with their kids and had to make adjustments. The first thing was to give back to the youth in the community and education. I wrote about education for a number of years. I have some thoughts on what I feel are deficiencies in education, but I can talk a lot. Have I tried to help? And so that was the first thing for me, is to really try to get more involved in my surrounding community in a way where I am visible and vocal and in touch with people. But I am also starting my own business. And in the 5-year plan, it is getting that off the ground to a point at which where I can sustain myself with that business and pay my bills with that and still be able to work with the nonprofit that does not pay my bills. But is the vision and the work that I want to be doing. And so there are about 3 different companies that I'll be working for at the same time. 2 of them will be mine. And then kind of like a subsidiary under that. And then, so I've published as a journalist, and I've produced as a journalist and a reporter and a producer, but to start to produce some of my own creative programming in the same, in the new technologies, we'll say it that way, what I'm working on as well. So, and helping others. So I am a developer. If you look at your Gallup strengths, I lead with learner, number 1. But I'm also a developer and I work in positivity. And so helping other people have the keys to do some of the things that they want to do, that they maybe didn't think they had the time or the skills to do. There are some things that, being able to put on your own podcast and put the information out there and help other people who may be in the same place that you are. That was the great thing about magazines and cable television. Magazine just became so segmented, other than the fact that the publishing industry didn't move with the technology the way everyone else did. What it did do is provide a community for any and everybody. If you wanted to read about cars, you could read about cars. If you wanted to read about photography, you could read about photography. If anybody has been watching Loki, like if all you wanted was a magazine about jet skis, it existed. They all existed with people who actually put their heart and soul into writing about these subjects. So that segmentedness still exists. We all have these different interests, and general programs can't always cover it. General podcasts can't always cover it. So there is a place for all of this, but maybe, the person who will put together ESPN Ocho, from dodgeball, the person who knows obscure sports quarterly may not be ready to do it today, but if I can help them get the skills and put together their own small studio, then that's part of what I want to do.
Well, that's awesome. Once those businesses, plural, are up and running, I'm gonna be reaching out like, I need some help getting my studio set up. Let's get it going. So that is awesome, Erica. I love to hear that. I'm excited for that. And, I'm going to be in touch. I'm going to be blowing you up once the time comes. So.
Oh, yeah, you don't get to go anywhere. We've talked about that.
Okay, good. Yeah, you're not going to let me go, even if I wanted to. But no. I'll be reaching out, so you don't have to worry about me. But, yeah, Erica, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time. As we start to wrap it up, I have to ask you, how can people get in touch with you? How can they learn more about all the amazing things you're up to? You wear so many hats. I don't know where you would even direct people, but what social media handles or emails or anything you can share with the people before we close out? Sure.
I am Queen City E on Instagram, so it's CITEE on that one. On Twitter, I'm also Queen City E. With Professionals Beyond the Game, I am PBTGORG on Instagram. You can email me. I was thinking about it pretty hard. I was like, wait a minute. I'm E Singleton, SINGLETON @pbtg.org. And yeah, info at pbtg.org also, any questions that anybody ever has. But for now, those are the easiest places to find me. I do have a YouTube channel, but right now it's private because we're revamping some things, getting stuff reworked out, and everything will be under the name of one of the companies. So, but yeah, I will say I didn't include, because it has been a journey. What you were going to read is because I lead with this. This is where I flex.
That's right. Flex on them.
I was an award-winning journalist who worked covering sports, travel, education, and entertainment. I worked for CBS Radio for a number of different years. I worked in Charlotte under a phenomenal broadcaster who has been in the industry for years, Beatrice Thompson. And one of the things I may not have mentioned, but I do want to add in, is if you meet someone who is willing to be your mentor, get a mentor. Somebody has traveled this journey before you and understands a little bit more than what you do at this point. If they're willing to pour into you, allow them to. So I've had a number of different people that I've met throughout the years who have helped me as mentors and colleagues. And so that is a big part of my success. I came in as a freelancer when I moved to Charlotte, back to Charlotte from the DC metropolitan area. And I was able to work for the Charlotte Post, which is the Black paper here in Charlotte. And it is with them that I won some newspaper journalism awards. And with Community Television of Prince George's in the DC metropolitan area, I won some television awards. No Emmys yet, still on my list. Look, I've broadened, I moved out some, but the thing about it is I also have stayed segmented as well. And when I had the opportunity, I have worked for general and even conservative broadcasting stations. But when I found a Black station, I did serve my community as best I could. And so that's the other thing, is that find what interests you and who you want to share information with. From a travel standpoint, I wanted to open things up to travel aspects that people didn't always think about. And that was an amazing time for me. Like I was able to experience things that I hadn't thought about, but also share it with the community. So I got some feedback from that. And so I also, it's not me specifically, but sometimes you can see pictures of me. I am part of, I think they are the first all Black women's U.S. Masters Swimming Club, the Mahogany Mermaids in North Carolina. So I teach swimming with them, and I also swim with them. So
love the name. Mahogany Mermaids. That's fire. I love that.
Fantastic. And they really, their mission goes beyond just swimming, but also informing people about the history of people from the diaspora, so Africans and African Americans in swimming, because so many people are always like, oh, we don't swim and everything. For real, we were the best swimmers in the world. We were used to scuba dive or dive before scuba gear was available, to dive for shipwreck and treasure. No, we have always had a presence in the water. And so as well as educate and inform and also water safety and swimming. So I love being with them, and you see my face every now and again.
Yeah, you got to do your research, people. Know your history. You know what I mean? Like, history. Yeah, that was real. Well, thank you. That was a perfect way for us to close out. Thank you for sharing all that as well. Love your advice about mentorship also. Got to tap into those mentors. I call it drafting mentors. You saw that in my book. You got to find people who you can pull into your life and that they can help bring you to the next level. And we'll have all of Erica's contact information and social media in the show notes, so make sure you check the show notes. Erica, thank you again for your time today. This has been phenomenal. We'll have to have you back on because we can easily do multiple episodes like this and just have you continue to share. But for now, this has been another great episode of the Thrive After Sports podcast and the Power of Story with the great, the one and only Erica Singleton. Thank you again, Erica. We'll see you next time, everybody.